Hey everybody, the day has finally arrived. We have the first plug-in hybrid half-ton pickup truck in North America. It's not going to be on sale till 2025, and oddly enough, it's not going to have a Ford logo on the front either. Honestly, I'd expected Ford to be first. Instead, we get the all-new 2025 Ramcharger, and here to discuss the quirkiness of this plug-in hybrid system and what on earth we're going to call it is Travis. So Travis, what do you think? You were actually on the call for the Ramcharger.
I was, and they started off with some simple updates on the 2025 model, and they went to highlight the the full electric truck, and then all of a sudden they said Ramcharger, and I thought to myself, what's going on here? The spelling being one of the things that most confused me, but they said it's not a plug-in hybrid truck, which I think we'll touch on quite a bit here.
So what do you think of the name Ramcharger? Is it too on the nose?
Um, I'm surprised it's not at least like hyphenated or separated in some way. Just having it all in one seems a little unusual. It is pretty on the nose. Stellantis obviously has had a charger in the portfolio before, so having a Ram charger now seems a little bit interesting. But it is at least on the nose. So if you want to know which model it is, it's pretty clear.
Now we should unpack the plug-in hybrid thing, I guess, first, since you brought it up. Try as I might, the only classification that bends towards what Ram claims they want to call this thing, which is a EV with a range extender sort of thing. The only classification that exists in North America is in California, and this does not qualify as a range extender. So it's going to be a plug-in hybrid according to the EPA and according to the California Air Resources Board. I am actually curious as to why they don't want to call it a plug-in hybrid, since the truck market skews slightly conservative, and conservatives seem to favor plug-in hybrid terminology over full electrics.
Yeah, I mean, when it was first introduced, the first thing we were told is it is not a plug-in hybrid. We were told it is a battery electric truck with a onboard generator, and I'm
Plug-in
not sure
hybrid.
right. I'm not sure how much we'll see that in the marketing, but that was what was reinforced is that it is an onboard generator, which in and of itself is an engine, which is what you get in a plug-in hybrid. So it's a
Yeah,
little
so
bit confusing.
what I'm hearing is that this has a hybrid of two different kinds of drivetrain technologies, and there's a fuel source of electricity, and it's
Which you would fill
hybridized in
up,
coordination with this electricity thing.
which you plug in.
Yeah, right.
So in
Yeah,
theory, it's a plug-in hybrid.
yeah. But we should talk about that system because it is definitely different than anything since BMW's i3 with a range extender.
And
Like that's
I've
the
gone on
closest.
record to say the i3 is a vehicle that I'm particularly a fan of. I understand why it didn't hit in all markets. I understand why the masses didn't adopt it. But I was on board with the range extender option. And BMW
Hmm.
called it the Rex. Because essentially what they had done that no other manufacturer had done to that point and until now has done is they had quite a large, especially for the year, quite a large electric range, and then
Yes.
they added some extra miles in gasoline. And we've talked about this before, and the systems are similar in that they're not the most efficient extending systems, but they were able to drive the vehicle as a pure electric with all the benefits that come with a pure electric
Hmm.
that we don't see in most of the the plug-in hybrid market right now. And so, obviously, two very different applications. We have the tiny microcar, the city commuter, and now we have the full-blown truck that's being advertised to go anywhere.
Right. And I guess we should unpack those numbers because this is kind of a curiosity here. So efficiency is not going to be the Ram Charger's forte. Uh,
No.
on a 92 kilowatt hour battery, they're saying you're going to go about 150 miles. So being generous so far, because I think they said 145-ish. So
145, yeah.
assume we'll call it 150. Let's be kind.
Mhm.
That's 1.6 miles per kilowatt hour. A Ford Lightning is EP rated for 2.35, and even
Yeah.
the big battery Ram battery electric, which is going to have a 168 kilowatt hour battery, that pencils out to 2.1 miles per kilowatt hour. So any way you slice it, this is less efficient than the actual electric truck. And then, according to the specifications, it's going to be 20 miles per gallon operating as a hybrid. And that's
Yeah.
way less efficient than an F 150 hybrid.
It is, and just a quick while we're looking at the numbers, we saw a similar instance with the BMW i3. Now, in this case, let's call the Rev, the full electric,
Mm-hmm.
the standard battery, and then the range extender on the Ramcharger. With the i3, all you saw when you added the onboard generator or the range extender was you saw a loss in efficiency, and that's because you're carrying around
Yes.
this extra weight. That's got to be part of it, but the 92 kilowatt hour battery that we get on the Ramcharger is significantly smaller and therefore one would presume significantly lighter. So even
Yeah.
adding in that engine shouldn't be the whole story, I don't think.
Yeah, and the motor specifications do change around a bit. It appears that these are not the same motors that are in the regular Ram 1500 battery electric. And the curiosity here is that the front motor is more powerful. It's 335 horsepower, 250 kilowatts. The rear motor is about 319 horsepower, 238 kilowatts. And if anybody out there is doing the math, yes, there is a math error here because it does not equal 663 horsepower. I have no idea why that is. Ram has not explained that so far. Any way you slice it, though, they're saying the front motor is more powerful. And this does make me wonder how much of this hybrid system is shared with the Chrysler Pacifica. Because the 3.6 liter Pentastar, they say, is tuned towards hybrid efficiency. So is the Pacifica hybrid. And the Pacifica hybrid actually has fairly large, powerful motors. And it would make sense in a way that if they're not going to borrow parts from the Grand Cherokee 4xe, which honestly I'd
Right.
expected them to do,
Mm-hmm.
then are they grabbing parts from their other plug-in hybrid to make the cost numbers pencil out?
I would expect they would do something, in that category. The cutout chassis that they showed was the same chassis as you get in the Rev, but obviously modified slightly to
Mm-hmm.
have that 3.6. Which again, if we're talking about a range extender, that is a large range extending motor. That little BMW
Yeah.
had a motorcycle engine. Obviously, it's a truck. We're looking at two different pieces here, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a significant piece of machinery to be carrying around and not using on a super regular basis. So I would imagine they drew it from the Pacifica, but
Mm-hmm. Now,
it's a very different vehicle. It's way more powerful.
when they showed the chassis, did they show the engine in the chassis? Could you see how it was arranged?
They did, yeah. And so the motor configuration from the front and the rear are two different. They are two different motors. The rear
Mm-hmm.
motor is a coaxial unit, while the front motor is stacked on top of itself. And just in front of that motor is where we have the Pentastar sitting there.
And I'm assuming it's a transverse engine, right? Could you see? Was it possible to actually tell rather than a
Uh,
longitudinal design?
it was not a super up close shot, so I couldn't tell you for sure. But with
Hmm.
they could almost configure it however they wanted to because
Right,
without
it
a
doesn't matter.
transmission, if they're
Yeah.
just connecting to this generator unit, it should be
Hmm.
whatever is easiest for packaging.
My guess is it's going to be a transverse engine arrangement. I am intrigued by so many aspects of this somehow. If you are going to stick an engine up front, why not have it mechanically power the front wheels? It's a truck, so that's probably the logical reason why not. Um, as far as the number imbalance between front and rear motor, my guess is that this is going to be efficiency related because the front electric motor will have a disconnect. So it's probably going to be a slightly different motor design. The rear motor may be more expensive. It may be more geared towards efficiency since it's the one that's always going to be connected. And the front motor will come and go whenever it's needed, as you'd expect. I guess the ultimate question here is the inherent 15 to 20% efficiency loss worth it to get EV driving like nature? And that's really the question and the reason that this drivetrain design is something different than we've seen before, because it's going to drive like an EV. It's going to have 663 horsepower until, of course, the battery is exhausted. We'll come to that in a moment. So it's going to
Mhm.
accelerate like an EV. It's going to have one paddle driving. It's going to be just over 4 seconds 0 to 60. It's going to have that instant power delivery, the smoothness of not having a transmission in the way like you would normally find in a plug-in hybrid, etc. But
Mhm.
that's going to be given to you at the sacrifice of 15-20% of fuel efficiency. Like the F-150 hybrid four-wheel drive with a mechanical four-wheel drive system, regular automatic transmission, is 15% more efficient than this will be.
Yeah, it's a significant loss. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the, again, just the marketing pieces was that we were told this is the ultimate battery electric truck. And it's tough when you're sitting next to the Rev, right, in the same category, and it's more efficient. It's just as
Mm-hmm.
powerful. It's quicker 0 to 60, probably because it doesn't have those extra onboard components. Um, but I guess the argument is that there are going to be a number of consumers that are like other folks worried about electric driving range. And when you talk about a truck,
Mm-hmm.
and if we talk to the core truck owner, and I don't mean the truck buyer, I mean the truck owner where they use it, they live it, they drive it. It is a workhorse for them on a regular basis. It's reasonable to say that an F-150 Lightning and the upcoming Silverado and probably the Cybertruck would not be able to do their towing hauling needs
Mm-hmm.
over
Mm-hmm.
significant distance. So it
It's a
almost writes them out
significant
completely.
consideration. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you
Yeah.
have the Ramcharger, you can go the distance. And so I think if we're talking about EV adoption, I think it's an option, a very unique option
Mm-hmm.
that is going to be a lot more accessible or make people more comfortable, even though it's going to be a lower efficiency. We know that most people don't check the efficiency of electric vehicles because they see a
Yes.
range number. That's what's most important.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of folks aren't even going to be concerned about it. And
And
from that
people don't
standpoint,
even
where we
seem
want
to
more adoption,
consider. Yeah, and some people
go
don't
ahead.
even seem to consider plug-in hybrid efficiency, to be honest, either, because
No.
uh, when we take a look at other serial mode hybrids out there, which it's a serial hybrid. That's the best way we could describe this technically. We have the Honda hybrids, the Honda two-motor hybrids. They're serial hybrids below about 45 miles an hour. We have the Outlander plug-in hybrid, similar situation there, serial hybrid only below 40 approximately miles an hour.
Mhm.
And fuel efficiency, really is a struggle with both of those vehicles, especially the Outlander plug-in hybrid. And oddly enough, this Ram and an Outlander plug-in hybrid, design-wise, aside from one little clutch, they're
Mhm.
basically a very similar concept. Um, and what makes me so torn on this is that I kind of want a Ramcharger now, because
I mean,
it
I
would
wasn't going to
actually.
say it. I didn't get on the phone right away. But if this ended up in our long-term test fleet, there's a lot to talk about.
I mean, it's like, because when I think about it, this would do what I want. I want to be able to drive electric only most of the time, even if you are a person that isn't necessarily caring about climate emissions. If you're just lazy,
Mhm.
you could drive your monthly drive cycle without ever going to a gas station. And that one time a month that you take your
Mhm.
RV somewhere or you take your boat to the boat launch, on 1 week a month, which is pretty typical.
Yep.
So a lot of people that I know that have boats, they seem to go out once a month this or so. Maybe they'll go out a bit more
Mhm.
frequent in the summer and not in the winter. So, year wise, it's maybe 12,
Averaged
15
out.
times a year. Right. So
Mhm.
you're never going to use any gas during the weekday, so you don't have to go to the gas station at all. That's kind of handy. And then when you do, you're going to sacrifice some efficiency in that window. I mean, any way you slice
Mhm.
it, a Ram 1500 regular Pentastar V6 is going to be more efficient towing that boat or driving down the freeway. But the theory here is that you're not actually doing that often, because even with the boat
Right.
attached, I mean, maybe you'd get 90 miles of range out of this thing before it moved to its hybrid mode.
Yeah.
But then you'd still have 500 miles to go.
It's a significant chunk, right? And like you said, for a
Hmm.
lot of folks, not only is it going to cover your daily driving, but I think we'll cover this a little bit more. The way they balance this battery, the range, and the fuel tank on the range is pretty interesting. 145 miles, and let's call it a plug-in hybrid because that's what it is. But even the lowest range electric vehicles on the market right now are doing just over 150
Hmm.
miles. So this is
Yeah.
the smallest EV battery, or not obviously not battery, but the smallest EV range, right?
Yeah.
But with everything else, and so I don't even think they needed to go this big on the EV range, and that's kind of what I'm curious about. My guess would be that it has to do more with kind of the battery output to be able to power this.
Hmm.
This is not an efficiency cruiser. This is a
Right.
performance vehicle. 4.40
Right.
to 60 is no slouch, but it's going to be a
That's
lot more
it's that's
attractive
very
to people who
logical.
wouldn't have considered the all electric truck. And for
Yep.
adoption purposes, I think that's great.
And the numbers kind of stack out with that because the towing capacity is more than a full ton higher than a regular Ram 1500. So if
Mhm.
you want 14,000 pounds of towing capability, you actually have to step up from the new 3-liter inline six twin turbo engine, 500 and
Mhm.
some odd horsepower in the regular Ram 1500 into this to get the extra towing capability. And it is
Mhm.
SAE tow rated. So it's the same towing test that every other truck falls under, and you also get an
Yep.
extra 300 pounds of payload capacity out of this, um, versus the regular Ram 1500. So there's definitely some logic behind that, and it makes sense because this battery capacity is about the same as a Tesla Model S or a Model
Mhm.
X. So this is one of the larger batteries that's really available in an EV in
Yeah.
the US right now, and that number of cells is required to deliver nearly 700 horsepower. It's over 650 horsepower. So I mean that's pretty
Right.
logical. You're never going to get that kind of power output and that kind of cooling ability for that power delivery out of a smaller pack.
And it's still half the size of the smallest
Yeah,
Rev battery, or
right.
just about
I
half the
mean,
size. Yeah.
it could have been a little smaller, but they wouldn't have saved too much. We have 600 horsepower ish in like an Ioniq 5N or an
Mhm.
EV6. Some other vehicles in that category have very similar power outputs, but I mean, we're still talking nearly 80 kilowatt hours, so it's
Right.
not a big battery difference size. It's not like they put you know a Rav4 Prime size battery in this.
No, no, they certainly didn't. And the other thing is the fuel tank, right?
Yeah, big fuel tank, 27 gallons. But then again,
27 gallons.
when you're towing a trailer, if you actually
Mhm.
have 14,000 pounds on the back, that 27 gallons is maybe can get you 270 miles before you refill. So
Yeah.
there's kind of a logical reason to the tank size there as well. I guess the real question will be, are truck owners really wanting that EV feeling, or are they interested in greater efficiency? Because the rumor mill keeps telling us that we will see other plug-in hybrids.
Mhm.
Supposedly, Ford has been working on one. We know that General Motors is not, however. So if anybody's hoping that GM will have one, apparently it's not in the cards. GM is not interested. Their battery electric platform was not designed to accommodate any of the gasoline bits. But the
Mhm.
Ford platform was, and so that could happen there. And there have been some rumors that maybe Toyota's working on something that's a little bit more opaque right now. We know that Nissan's not because Nissan canceled the Titan.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think as far as the is the truck owner going to want this truck? Now, obviously, there's going to be from the same trim levels across the standard truck to the Ramcharger up to the Rev. There's obviously going to be a significant price difference, but like you said, even the high output 3 liter inline six is going to be falling short on the performance scale. So
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be getting more performance. It is going to be more efficient in your daily driving, even if it's an inefficient electric vehicle. It's still quite a bit more efficient as far as just total energy usage than your traditional gas engine. So there's
Yeah.
those pieces to look at. But what I'm pleased about, again, I don't love that it's as inefficient as it is, but what I'm glad is that this is a plug-in hybrid that is going to drive like a battery electric. That's what we saw in the i3, and that's what we don't see in most of the plug-in hybrids on the
Mm-hmm.
market because they're not tuned towards the electric range. They're tuned for the overall package, and that happens to include electric. But if you go in a Hyundai Tucson and you are pure electric mode, you're getting a third of the driving performance of the whole system, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
a particularly appealing thing for folks who do want to drive electric.
Right, and that's a good thing to circle back to the i3, because this is going to have a similar problem, I guess you'd say, to the i3.
Mhm.
The generator on board will put out 130 kilowatts continuous, 190 kilowatts peak. So that is 174 horsepower electrically, approximately 254 horsepower peak. They
Mhm.
didn't say how long the duration of peak horsepower is.
Right.
And we don't know the efficiency of all the onboard conversion circuitry. So in a rational world, take 10% off of that for generator losses, inversion losses, and motor losses. All of that's going to come into there. So there is going to be a point, if you have not prepared, where you have a 10,000 pound trailer on the back and you're going up I-80 from San Francisco to Tahoe or Denver to Avon, Colorado, and you've only got 170 horsepower on tap. That's gonna
Yeah.
suck pretty bad.
Yeah. Now they did mention, the 145 miles of electric, and then it'll kick on your onboard
Mm-hmm.
generator, your range extender. But they did mention that when you initiate the tow haul mode, that that
Mm-hmm.
bottom line, that lowest charge or lowest charge level before the engine kicks on is going to be increased. And I think that is
Yes.
really important for truck owners to know that that button is going to be critical if you're going to be towing
Mm-hmm.
over 100 miles on your trip. But
Right.
it
And there
should,
is a charge
because we,
mode.
we didn't get this. Yes, and we didn't get this in the i3 in the US, where you could start charging it before it depleted. They were that way in
Mm-hmm.
other markets. So it's a good thing for, I think, a lesson learned. But that tow haul mode is going to be super important so that you maintain the performance, you get all the benefit of it, and then you don't end up with an anemic truck,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not great for ownership experience or what they're going to go tell their friends either.
Yeah, there's some unanswered questions here because tow haul mode obviously is a solution to this, right? So it's like but you have to prepare. And I know that the Volt forums, you're an owner of a Volt.
Mhm.
The Volt forums, first generation, were full of people that were complaining that the car didn't automatically engage hill mode because it
Mhm.
had a similar situation when you came up to a steep incline. If you hadn't actually thought of this in advance, you could get
Mhm.
left with quite little horsepower. I3, same situation. If you
Mhm.
exhausted the
Even
battery and you're
worse.
out on the highway, yeah, it's like, the performance just keeps dropping and eventually your maximum speed ends up around 50 miles an hour. And you can climb hills. It was very
Yeah,
slow. It could be done.
you're not
Um,
making friends.
Right. But you could pull off and you could let it charge, and that's what you could
Mhm.
do in the RAM range extender as well. You could pull off, you could let it charge, do its thing, etc. Um,
Mhm.
I am just curious as to why they went in this direction because if they had gone in a more conventional plug-in hybrid direction, the advantage there would be if they just borrowed a 4xe system, for instance, you'd have 270
Mhm.
horsepower through a regular automatic. And that's not going to be
Mhm.
great pulling your trailer up a steep hill, but you could still do it. I mean, it'd be screaming,
Yeah,
you'd be going 50 miles an hour maybe, but it
yeah.
would get you further up the hill than 170.
I think a lot of this packaging is, again, I find it really interesting. I don't know if I agree with all of it, but I can see where they're coming from. I think a lot of it is to avoid people running into some of the issues that you get with electric cars. Obviously, range and performance concerns, and what if it's cold and I have a trailer, those sorts of things. But so that tells me it's for the folks who are new to the electric world in a lot of ways. But then they're also
Mm-hmm.
expecting with this tow haul mode that they're going to know how to operate the vehicle to help avoid some of those scenarios. And I hope it works,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want first time EV owners, and this will be treated like an EV for
Yeah.
95% of people, 95% of the time. You don't want them to run into that scenario. They go, "Where'd my power go?" Because they're expecting it from their electric car.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, and let's wrap this episode up by saying, or by answering this question, uh,
Mhm.
are you more or less excited about this than a Silverado or Sierra EV? I have to say, I'm more excited about the Ram, even though I'm a little bit iffy on some of these details around there. I am more interested in this than the electric Ram, and more interested in this than the Silverado and Sierra EV somehow.
I'm certainly more intrigued. I would have to have all the numbers in front of me, but from my standpoint, if I could have a smaller battery that has a backup plan, I would probably lean towards this Ramcharger. I would just really appreciate
Mhm.
the efficiency being greater than what it is.
And how about this versus a Lightning?
So, from someone who's very comfortable with electric range and understanding the impacts that you have on something like towing, which again a lot of people don't do, I would absolutely take a Lightning. I appreciate a lot of things about that Lightning, especially just the conventional nature of it. It doesn't scream I'm electric; it just happens to be electric.
Mhm.
So I would probably take a Lightning over a Ram Charger, but I'm still incredibly interested in the Ram
Mhm.
Charger. There could be a world where I'd say, you know what, let's give this a go. But I would probably lean towards the Lightning.
So after having the Lightning, I and realizing the Lightning didn't quite work for me, I think I would be Ramcharger. It is interesting, and it's in a way the Ramcharger you could debadge it, and it would look exactly like the regular Ram because the
Mhm.
exterior is the same. It still has the grill, it still has the cooling. So as far as that
Mhm.
normative truck look, it actually wins over the EV Lightning, which has a blanked out grill because now it has a front
Mhm.
trunk, which of course the Ramcharger does not have because the engine has to
Right.
live somewhere, and that somewhere is the hood, of course.
Which is fine.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's an okay trade off because if you're
Mhm.
going from a regular truck, you aren't missing anything because you never had a front trunk. So why do you care?
Right.
But you don't have that extra efficiency, or sorry, extra convenience that you would have in a front
Yeah.
trunk. If I can actually get my
See,
words out.
for me right now, I have a truck. I have an old pickup that does truck duty occasionally, but more time. I spend more time in the driver's seat because I need to drive the vehicle than I
Mm-hmm.
do because I need to use the vehicle. Right? It needs to be driven.
Mm-hmm.
So I would probably fall into the hey, listen, the Lightning is going to do most of what I need it to. But if it was going to be more traditional truck use on a more
Mm-hmm.
regular basis, then you are going to run into some of those difficulties. You are going to be towing a boat and have to charge. That's not going to work right now. There are not a lot, if any, pull through stations designed for towing.
Yep.
So the Ramcharger is going to make sense for a lot of those folks. And again, I think
Mm-hmm.
while definitely an imperfect solution, it is a great introduction to the electric world, the electric truck world. And I think it'll get a lot of people on board. I'm curious to see it sales versus the Rev. Pricing is obviously going to
Mm-hmm.
be a significant portion of that, and that was not announced. I don't expect it to be cheap,
Yeah,
but I'll be curious to
that's going to be
see
an
how that
interesting one.
looks. Yeah,
Yeah, I hope I can't say I expect. I hope it is less expensive than the full electric model. It does have a
I do
decently
too.
smaller battery.
Hmm.
It is less. It is about 2/3 or so the battery that we have. Actually, a little bit less than that than the battery we have in the full on battery electric model. So that could lower the expense. The V6 is pretty cheap because they make a lot of them.
Hmm.
So I'm curious to see how the pricing does sort out there. But it's kind of a novel concept here because it does DC fast charge, so it does all the EV things.
Yep,
Um, and if you are concerned about resources being used and the large amount of resources that go into a big battery truck, the big Ram Rev is going to have a nearly 230 kilowatt hour usable battery pack. It's absolutely
massive.
massive.
Yeah.
And so they could build more than two of these for each one of those as far as the battery resources goes. So that there is a kind of a logic to that. It doesn't drop
Hmm.
your total consumption to zero because even if you never charge, or sorry, never fill up, theoretically never fill up, never want to
Yeah.
use the gasoline engine, it's going to
Yeah.
exercise it now and then. It's going to consume some gasoline. It's not a
Yeah.
lot, but there's going to be some burnt. But the trade-off there is that you've used fewer resources. You probably have a lighter truck. It's certainly going to be lighter than a Hummer. I mean,
Hmm.
nothing is heavier than a Hummer practically.
No, I mean, I
Um,
haven't seen a battery bigger than what you find in that Hummer. So
the Ram Rev is gonna be the biggest one available in the US because it's
that
just
229.
slightly bigger. Yeah, just slightly bigger than the one that we find in the Silverado Sierra and Hummer. Um, but it's not gonna. Ram is claiming better range. I'll believe it when I see it. They want to say 500 miles of range in the Ram Rev. Um, I'm having troubles with that number somehow based on the range that we do find in the GM trucks. Maybe Ram has
Yeah,
a secret sauce to efficiency that no one
something
knew
up their
they
sleeve.
possessed.
Yeah.
Right. Um, but yeah, so everybody, let us know what you think about the Ram Rev down there in the comment section and all of these weird and random EV market questions that it brings up. Should it be called a range extending EV or a plug-in hybrid? Should it be called I don't know what it should be called. Should you buy one? Should you want one? Is the gasoline engine on board a good thing, a bad thing? I don't know. And because I didn't actually address this at first, let me clarify that the only classification that is range extending EV in the US is California again. And that was the i3 Rex because the gasoline range was less than the EV range. That's how it has to be in order to qualify for that section. And that's why the
Hmm.
i3 in the US had a smaller gas tank than in Europe. It was actually just limited. It was the same size tank, but
Hmm.
you couldn't use all of it. But that is the logic. And that is all about carb credits in California, California Air Resources Board, ZEV credits, and the way you get extra credits for being a range extending EV. At any rate, Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Check out the related videos over on the Auto Buyer's Guide channel, and be sure and see us next week.